country, and they got to be bought off to become part of the system, and that's the main reason why the aid is going there.
How about Clinton? Now we're going to go about something a little backwards here. We're going to discuss Clinton's cabinet looking more like America in a moment, but before that, how about just who he's appointed in this region?
Well, they've been interesting appointments. His chief Middle East advisor is a man named Martin Indyk, who's actually an Australian. He was given citizenship about 10 days before he was appointed, so that it would be legitimate. Indyk came to the United States, I think, about 10 years ago, and became he was appointed by AIPAC, which is the registered Israeli lobby.
Right.
And he worked for the Israeli lobby. And then they decided that it would be useful to have a kind of a think tank that's not officially connected with the lobby, so it would look more independent, and it could present that their point of view, but with the look of independence. So they spun off this think tank called the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, which he headed, and it was basically, I mean, it wasn't a great secret. It's basically an Israeli propaganda agency, and he moved directly from that to becoming Clinton's chief advisor. The next person on the list is Samuel Lewis, who was he was a U.S. ambassador in Israel, and he was kind of a joke in Israel because he was so, he was sort of like more holy than the Pope, and when he was there, he had his hobnobbing with the right wing and so on and so forth. That's that's the main decision-making bureaucratic apparatus, and it reflects the. I frankly don't think it's going to have a big policy effect. Here I disagree with others, but I would expect Clinton pretty much to follow what's been.
But it's not certainly not going to improve.
It's certainly not going. I mean, I think he's going to follow the policy that the U.S. has been following for a long time, namely to try to ensure that Israel, which is the main U.S. ally, is the dominant force in the region and can be part of this system that protects, it's called what's called a strategic asset, keeps what they call stability, meaning prevent local nationalist forces from developing, and they want Egypt to participate in that. The Palestinians have no role, no rights, and they don't contribute to these strategic interests at all. They're just people. And I think that that's been the framework, and Clinton, if anything, will probably intensify it.
In the film that's out about you, that you said you haven't seen, but I have, which is excellent, and in release right now, and everyone should go see it. You quote John Jay, one of our beloved founding fathers, and I found the quote very telling when I thought about Clinton talking about a cabinet that looks more like America. And I think that word "looks" is very applicable because it might look more like America, but I certainly don't see any poor people on it. But what was the John Jay said?
John Jay, his favorite maxim was that the people who own the country ought to govern it. He was president of the Constitutional Convention, first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
How upset do you think he would be with the Clinton cabinet?
Oh, they're the people who own the country, all right. In fact, it's biased even more than usual towards wealthy corporate lawyers, investment bankers, people from Congress who are noted for their cozy relation to major business interests. Rubin, who's one of the chief economic advisors, comes from the largest what is now probably the largest investment firm in the country, Goldman Sachs, and the rest of them are from the same background.
The good folks at Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, right. It's been claimed, I don't know exactly where, I think Time magazine claimed that it had more millionaires than any of the preceding
staff
cabinet.
of Time magazine, or
the journal. I didn't look at their computations, but it's plausible. They got the point, whether the details are right.
It's a daring story for Time Warner to break. Speaking of that part of the world, Manhattan, we had one of the biggest events of the first 100 days. It's affected a lot of other things, is the World Trade Center bombing. How do you see that? At first I thought it was just an NBC News rehearsal. It got a little bit out of hand. How do you see that? What ramifications do you think that
Well, there is, first of all, the question. I mean, let's assume, for the sake of this discussion, that the people that they've fingered are the right people.
And if that's the case, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to blow up the World Trade Center.
Well, you know, there's a lot of very strange things about that explosion.
That's a little too.
For one thing, there's been some interesting discussion about this in the Israeli press, the Hebrew press in Israel, who've raised some obvious questions. I mean, you know, the people who carried out the bombing look as if they wanted to be caught. I mean, both the method of bombing, the trails that they left behind, I mean, coming back a couple of times to pick up
rental car,
money for $100 for a rental car. I mean, the connections to the connections abroad and so on and so forth. And they've pointed out plausibly that there's only two possible interpretations. One is that it was just an unbelievably incompetent group of people. I mean, I mean, even from the kind of bomb that they picked.
The gang that couldn't blow up straight.
It's just so that's one possibility. Just unimaginable incompetence. The other possibility is that they were infiltrated by a very professional outfit who wanted them to expose, who had a purpose. And there were some things you can think about.
A grassy knoll.
Well, you know, I mean, it's a group of people that would not be very hard to infiltrate.
Well, how do you think this plays out? I mean, right here in Somerville, now they're talking about which I don't think it means much that this is a quote-unquote sanctuary city, except as a gesture. It says, you know, we're not going to harass immigrants in this town. But now they're talking about rescinding that. The city council is entertaining that idea, and I think it's...
we should have, I mean, let's continue to assume that what the FBI says is correct, and I think it probably is. One of the interesting things that developed in the World Trade bombing thing was a letter that was, you know, given the front page a couple of times, you know, from a group that claimed to be responsible, and which some regard as authentic. I mean,
they used Arabic numbers in it. So.
I mean, there's some questions about it. But let's assume it to be authentic. I mean, in my opinion, it's probably authentic. But it's interesting to read it. I mean, if we paid attention to what it said, honestly, we might learn something. So, for example, the core part of their letter said that the American people should question the role of their government in carrying out or supporting terrorism throughout the world. And if the American people don't question that and do something about it, they too may be subject to terrorism. Well, you know, those are words that we should listen to, because in fact they had a point. The U.S. is one of the major terrorist states in the world, and there are plenty of people around the world who are, you know, who have suffered from U.S.-run terrorism and care about it. People here may not care about it, but the victims do. And they're all over the world.
And if you don't have the price of a ticket to Baghdad, you can go look at the World Trade Center.
It's not, I mean, all through the Middle East, Lebanon, for example, has been a major target of U.S., direct U.S. or else U.S.-supported terror. Central America and the Caribbean have been targeted for U.S. terror